the world, hear the song that we're singing. Come on, get happy. A whole lot of loving is what we'll be bringing. We'll make you happy. We'll make you happy.
Hey everybody, it's July here on Toy Talk. And of course, July is when we celebrate the birth of our nation. Now, normally during this segment of the show, I teach about something I've learned. But this month, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Rather than teaching about something I've learned, I'm going to simply talk about something I've observed. And it's really specifically in regard to the name of our country, the United States of America. Very specifically, the first word, united. Because as I look around, I don't really see a country of people that are united. If anything, I see a lot of people that are very much divided on many topics and on many views. Now, I first noticed this in 1996. I lived in Massachusetts my entire life, and in the fall of '96, I moved to Oklahoma to go to college. Now, this just happened to be at the same time that Bill Clinton was running for re-election, his re-election campaign for president. And as soon as I got on that campus, all I heard out of everybody was, there is no chance Bill Clinton's getting reelected. Everybody hates him. There's just absolutely no chance he's going to get a second term. And this completely threw me off because having lived in Massachusetts, I had always thought Bill Clinton was fairly popular. And I didn't realize there were a lot of people out there that did not like him or did not support him. Now you have to realize this was before the days of social media. The internet was in its infancy, so we did not have Facebook or Twitter or anywhere where you could just flip on your computer and see everyone's views on a topic. So this going and finding this out and seeing this was troubling to me and confusing to me. Now, of course, you can see this a lot easier now that social media is in place. And we've seen it continue on throughout the next 3 presidents. First, there was George W. Bush, and people were very much in support of him, and some people were very much against him, mainly in regard to 9/11 and to the Iraq War. We saw this continue on with Barack Obama, very specifically in regard to our division about race and about health care. And we continue to see it now with Donald Trump, with people very fiercely against him and some very strongly in support of him. And on different views, we see so much division, what people think about immigration, what people think about marriage, whether it should be just between a man and a woman, or if it should be in any 2 people that love each other. And we have these majorly divided views. Now this troubles me, mainly because there is an old saying that says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Now I would hate to see the United States become just another former great nation. Because, you know, this is my home. I've lived here my entire life. And now everybody, or most people, would like to make improvements to their home. There's things we'd like to see better. But our home is what gives us protection. It's our covering. It's what gives us support, a place to live. And as our actual houses provide those for us on a daily basis, metaphorically, our nation provides a home for us in the same way. Now, how could we possibly overcome something like this? I don't believe we are ever going to become united in believing all the exact same things and having the same views. But what I believe we can do is we can get back to the basics, the reasons why this nation was formed. America was formed because the people felt they were being treated unjustly. And so they came and they started a nation built on 3 principles: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If we can get back to this basic form, and really, if we can just focus on even one of those things, let's say the pursuit of happiness, it gives us something to build upon. Now, let me expand on that a little bit. Most people hear the pursuit of happiness and they think it's a matter of going out and trying to make yourself happy. You know, getting the good job, getting the house, all these different things, raising your family, and those are all good. We do want to strive to be happy people. But I believe the pursuit of happiness is more than that. It's not just about making ourselves happy. It's about doing things to help other people around you. It's about thinking of your neighbor. It's about thinking of your fellow citizens. And if we could go out and in the things that we do in our daily lives, if we can learn to not just think about what will better our lives, but what will better those around us as well, I believe that's a great starting place for us to rebuild or to continue to build as a great nation. Now, I really hope that happens, and I hope America continues on to thrive and survive for hundreds and thousands of more years. Because, as I said before, this is my home. And as cliche as it may sound, and this is not to put down any other nation, but the bottom line is, I say God bless America. Let's cut to commercial.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet, Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
G.I. Joe, G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe, on the land, on the sea, in the air.
G.I. Joe is really something to sing about. With all the authentic equipment you can get, you'll play with G.I. Joe year after year. You can start with one G.I. Joe soldier. Then, with just a handful of equipment packages, you can set up exciting battle action. The more equipment you get, the larger your battlefield. Keep collecting. Soon you'll get G.I. Joe as a Marine, a sailor, and a pilot, too. It's going to be hard to keep Dad from getting in on the fun. He'll want to set up a whole combat squad. Soon you'll have the biggest, the most exciting G.I. Joe combat action you ever dreamed of. Get in on the fun. Start collecting authentic G.I. Joe equipment. Remember, only G.I. Joe is G.I. Joe.
Now, normally at this point in the show, we would have our Toy of the Week segment. However, this month we're going to do things a little bit differently because my guest not only collects a real American hero of a toy, hint, hint, but also he has a really interesting story that goes along with it. So let's introduce this week's guest, Jason Stevens.
Hi,
Jason,
Jack.
great to have you here on Toy Talk.
Good to see you again.
Now, Jason, we met through Eric Marimaldi, who was on the show a few months back. And how exactly do you two know each other? I know you collect together, but I wasn't sure how you met.
Eric and I met. He became a familiar face in what we call the circuit.
Oh, okay. So it was from
and
around
by that, yeah, bumping into him at
markets.
Todd's farm, and of course I started really seeing him a lot in Newburyport, where I'm from.
Okay.
So
And
typical.
he lives in that area as well, right? Is it?
Yeah, he's in Byfield.
Byfield,
so
yeah.
so I'd see him typical Saturday mornings hitting yard
Different
sales and
yard
whatnot.
sales, yeah.
And so started talking to him and finding out what his interests were
Sure.
in comparison to mine. So sometimes we exchanged notes and
Of course.
gave
yeah,
each other
same as
leads.
we've done. Yeah, same as I've done with him.
Yep.
And I always ask the former guest, do you have anybody you think would be a good guest on the show? And he brought you up and said that you collect G.I. Joes. But,
Thanks, Eric.
we got together, met for lunch, and you shared the story about how you got started collecting, which isn't, it's kind of a sad story, but if you could share that with us a little bit.
Yeah, to recap, my uncle, who actually lived in the area, he lived in Ipswich. His name was Paul Tugis.
Okay.
He was dating a girl whose father was Sam Petrucci. So many G.I. Joe collectors will recognize that name. So Sam Petrucci was the one that was contacted by Hasbro and actually did the original artwork on some of the G.I. Joe boxes.
Absolutely.
So that conceptual that he did took place in the early 60s.
Okay.
And it was around that time, and there's a theory, and I don't want this to kind of go rogue nationwide, that he actually had my uncle Paul Tugis in mind, who was a young man in senior year of high school when he illustrated G.I. Joe.
That's interesting. And since we're talking about Petrucci right now, why don't we bring up one of the boxes right off the bat that has some of his artwork on it?
Yeah, so this is probably the most widely recognized Sam Petrucci work.
It's got the soldier charging into battle,
Yep,
carrying
indeed,
his rifle.
indeed, yep. So he did a few of them, but I brought two today.
Two of
He
a
was
gel.
designing these and doing the artwork before the G.I. Joe soldiers even went mainstream.
Absolutely, because the first one came out in 1964.
Yes,
Correct.
correct.
And
Yeah.
you shared about your brother as well.
Yeah, so, tragically, my Uncle Paul Tugas died before I even knew him.
Okay.
I have a cousin, Paul Tugas, so we grew up pretty close to Sam Petrucci and his family, going up to Lake Winnipesaukee. And of course, I paid it no mind being young, but we did have a handful of G.I. Joes as kids, me and my two brothers.
Yeah. And now, were these originals that he had designed, or were they just, you just had
Yeah,
G.I. Joe?
yeah, they were some of the original ones, which I'll share later today. And,
Sure.
we didn't really pay too much mind to who
Yeah, it
he
was just
was.
a toy,
It
and he was
kind of
just
a story.
the guy who was a friend of the family. Yeah.
So after he passed away, I read his obituary, Sam Petrucci, and he was really an intriguing person. And I started talking to my older brother, Jeff, about 2 years ago now. And I told him, I said, Jeff, do you remember the G.I. Joes we had? Because I had always collected Star Wars and I had other interests. And he goes, yeah, those were so great. And I said, I'm going to start collecting G.I. Joe. He got excited because he had always been a collector of other things, coins and whatnot.
Okay.
And he said to me, you know what, I'm going to do that with you. That'll be fun.
Absolutely. So you guys set out to start this, but didn't
Yeah, we
quite
set out
work
to
out
start
that
it,
way.
but it didn't work out that way. So tragically, my brother Jeff was killed by a drunk driver. And after a couple months, I kind of rehashed that conversation we had.
Yeah.
So I told my brother Chris, I said, I'm going to get back into collecting these G.I. Joes. Yeah, it's become kind of therapeutic, and my brother Chris and I have kind of bonded over it, and we've scoured the entire East Coast, going to flea markets and yard sales and antique
So Chris
shops.
does the G.I. Joes as well. 'Cause I know you told me he collects, is it Shogun Warriors, is it?
Yeah,
Or
he's more of a Shogun Warrior and Godzilla, and he's into those types of things. But
maybe we'll have him on as a guest at
yeah,
some point.
yeah, hopefully.
But that's good. It's
So-
bonded you two together. I didn't realize he was looking for the G.I. Joes as well. I thought he
Yeah.
had gone a different route than that.
Right,
but
right,
but
yeah.
let's go ahead and take a look at some of the
Yeah,
Joes you have.
So in the process, the ones that would have come with the boxes that I just showed you is here was one of the early sailors. So these are called the painted heads, and of course G.I. Joe has the trademark scar on his cheek.
Yes, you got them right
so
there.
this is what somebody would have been excited to get back in 1964.
Now, by the 64s, we were talking about this a little while ago. You're referring to the 12-inch figures before they went to
Correct.
the 3 3/4, like the
Correct, in
Star
the 80s.
Wars.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
In the 80s, they made that change. See, these are the ones that I remember. I remember one specifically having was when it came out, the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. And I remember he had the fuzzy hair and the fuzzy beard.
Yes.
G.I. Joe, now with leg-like hair from Hasbro.
Yes.
And that was kind of the big deal at the time. I remember just the commercials, just G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip.
Yep.
Like it was like
Yep.
Brute by Fabergé, like it meant.
Yep.
So, it was
Yep.
kind of
well,
something
Kung Fu Grip came out in about
significant.
74. So this
Okay.
line, they're called the painted heads. They began at 64. And,
So 10 years further.
and what had happened is, toward the end of the 60s, Hasbro recognized that many people were starting to go anti-war.
Okay.
So they introduced what you're referring to as the Adventure Team. So
Okay.
some people call them the Fuzz Heads, and I brought
I
one
didn't
here
realize
today.
that. Okay.
And Kung Fu Grip came out in 74. That was
Well,
the year I
now
was
that you
born.
mention it, I never really thought about it, but the one I had
So-
was more of a martial artist than a soldier, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Oh, I have him too. I should have
So,
brought him for you.
I didn't even think
so,
about that.
So this guy here, he has the fuzz head that most
we'll
people
just kinda
most
show
people
that a
collect.
little
So,
bit.
yeah. So have a look at him. He's got the Kung Fu Grip, and if
does
if you
have
want
that grip.
Yep.
Yeah, I know what you were going to say. Now,
Yeah.
the original, one of the great things about this particular figure, he's one of the few G.I. Joes, definitely one of the first G.I. Joes, that actually was a pull string.
Yes. So
I'm going to go ahead
you
and
gotta
pull
go
it
all the
and
way
then
with
let
it, though.
you kind of
Yep.
share about that a
All
little
the way.
bit. Got to get it all the way out there. And that really does stretch, man.
10 seconds to lift off and counting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, a little bit more about the pull strings you were telling me earlier. And
Well, as my brother Chris and I started to find some of these, we knew very little, and
I never knew they existed until you mentioned
Yeah,
it today.
yeah. So we knew about some basic things like the Kung Fu Grip, but then once I started finding some of these talkers,
Mm-hmm.
9 out of 10 times you'd get absolutely nothing, or the string would already be stuck.
Okay.
But occasionally we'd get a voice that was muffled. So
And this
we
one
went
was very
home.
clear.
yeah, we took small screwdrivers, we took apart the entire G.I. Joe, and
Mm-hmm.
my brother Chris is into records, so he prides himself and gives himself credit on learning how to clean these. So he actually went through and he cleaned everything meticulously.
Okay.
We pieced it back together, and sure enough, half the time we can get them reworking. So
Pull strings are one of my favorite toys to collect. I've got a soft spot for pull strings for whatever reason. And I know how hard it is to find pull strings that are still in working condition. But I know pull strings are I mean, not even a dying breed, they're a dead breed, you know, you don't
Yeah.
see them anywhere anymore.
Yeah, so those are some more of the basic line, you know, from the older style in the 60s to what they finally kind of morphed into with the Adventure Team in the 70s. But
Yes.
also learned along the way that any G.I. Joe collector, they're really looking at a few different pieces that some of which weren't very popular. So it's
You know,
it is
that's
kind of
the
ironic,
way it
isn't
is with a lot
Yeah.
of toys. It's those toys that nobody had.
Yep.
Because, you know, they're harder to find because, you know, just nobody ever had them as a kid. And those become the really collectible ones a lot of the time.
Right.
Kind of like the Rocky meat. Who wanted meat as a kid? But, you know.
And one of them everybody talks about is the G.I. Joe nurse. So I was fortunate to get this for a fair price recently. And she's actually missing her arm, which is
And her
common.
shoes, but
Yep. And actually, even in that condition,
it's
probably worth about $800.
$800.
So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's a very rare toy, especially in reference to this line.
And then they also made an early African American G.I. Joe. They eventually made one for the Adventure Team too, which was much more common.
Okay. So this was earlier. This would have been closer to 64?
Yes,
or?
yes. So
See, now I knew
around
they had
65,
done,
66.
you know, African American G.I. Joes over these. I didn't realize they did them that early because 64 would be, that's right around the time of the civil rights movements. So, I mean, you know, especially down south, this had to be a pretty controversial toy. I mean, you still had places at that point in time where you know, had separate drinking fountains, or you couldn't sit at the counter in a restaurant or something, you know, and to release a toy like that, it really was kind of not only that it was groundbreaking, but it was a risky thing for Hasbro to do.
yeah, I would agree. But this particular G.I. Joe, it's a very rare one.
Now, let me ask you, you said you clean the records a lot inside on the pull strings. Do you generally get the Joes in this kind of condition, or do you do a lot of cleaning on your own?
We clean them up. A lot of people will even restring them because G.I. Joes are what is very commonly called knee cracks. So there's been G.I. Joes that have been found in the original box unopened, and of course, just
cracked.
based on time, if somebody were to open it, there'd still be cracks. A lot of people will actually repiece them, but you know, as you begin to learn, you can actually tell what some of the older pieces were. Occasionally,
Definitely
I'll
beyond
come
my
across
talent
one.
range, but
yeah, I'll come across one, and you can tell that the shading, even the color of the plastics, are a little bit off. So, in the past couple years, really since I started collecting, I've probably had several hundred G.I. Joes go through my hands. I've held on to probably have about 75. So I
so you
I
got a
hold
solid
on to the
collection.
pristine ones. I have a small network of people that occasionally I'll sell bulk lots of the ones that you know. But some people don't mind, you know, if they have multiple cracks, they display fine,
I mean,
but they bother me.
I have quite a few toys like that where, you know, I got a lot that are pristine and I got others that are pristine from what you can see. I mean, even the Charlie McCarthy that I brought on here had the crack in this hat that I had on a couple of months ago. But, you know, he still displays fine. I'd like to replace it at some point, but, you know.
My brother came up with a term because, you know, when we'll buy a big bulk lot of G.I. Joes, of course, there's additional accessories and clothes.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So he coined it snipping and clipping.
Snipping and clipping,
Yeah,
okay.
so we'd sit in my kitchen over a couple beers, and I'd literally go through and we'd hand wash the clothes and we'd lay them all out.
Oh, wow.
And I don't typically iron my own shirts, but
You'll
eventually
iron the Joes.
I would iron the shirt, and then we'd actually just snip off the additional strings and whatnot that hang out. So
I mean, the viewers have probably already noticed. They're much better dressed than you are. No,
absolutely.
just messing with you, man.
I have the roll out of bed look.
You mentioned the foreign ones. Why don't we bring some of those
Yeah,
up?
so the foreign ones, they did not have the scar. So if you can look at this one here is the Russian, but if you take off his hat, they said he had more of like a Nordic look. So
You know,
that's the term.
Not for nothing, but he looks a lot like McCoy from Star Trek to me. If we, were to get
He
a close up
absolutely
on that
does.
after,
He absolutely does.
very much.
And one of the other ones I don't have him with a stand is the
Okay, we'll just
Japanese
hold him up.
soldier.
A Japanese soldier. No, he was Japanese or Korean. Was it?
He's
from the Korean War?
Japanese.
Japanese.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know the three that are heavily sought after are really the Japanese soldier, the African American, and the nurse.
And you've got the
And
trio.
Yeah, I got the trio there.
For anyone who is a specific Joe collector and knows anything about G.I. Joes, they know the ones that are rare to see. And I mean, to just be able to get a viewing of these and get my hands on the three of them, man, is just amazing. They're just,
Yep, absolutely. Oh, I've been in public and I've had people call me up. They're at a yard sale or at Todd's, and they'll say, "Hey, I think I found one."
And sure enough, it's
because they're on the lookout for me.
Yeah.
And I'll be somewhere in public, and I'll be like, "Okay, what you need to do is you need to pull down his pants and check his butt." And of course, someone will hear me in a grocery store or whatnot. but really, that's what people. Yeah.
So I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So for somebody who might stumble upon some of these, or they think so at a yard sale, it's just a tip for anybody who's watching the show that the authentic ones have the 1964 date that will be on the right butt cheek. Just to be clear on that too, that the new ones do have 1964 on the right butt cheek, but then they'll have the new date on the left butt cheek as well. So if somebody looks and they see double stamps on both sides,
good thing to know, because I might have saw the one stamp and got, oh my gosh, it's a 64, and not noticed the other until later on.
Yep.
Honestly, when I said I've seen the newer ones in the stores, I've always seen them sealed in the box, so it's pretty easy to spot right off the bat.
Sure.
The years right there. But they honestly though, they look pretty identical. Like you said, if you didn't pull it down and check the the date, if it was loose, you really can't tell the difference between the newer ones and the older ones.
Yeah,
I can.
The detail in the face. You can tell that the newer ones have inferior plastic to begin with, and the details in the painting is just not there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's generally how it is on most of the remake toy, the redone toys. But I mean, to look at them, if I didn't see me, not as a serious collector of GI Joes as you are, if I were to pick that up loose without checking the date, I wouldn't have known if it was 2005 or if it was 1964.
Yeah. So this is the Green Beret. So a lot of people like him as well. So
Now let me ask you. Now I know you focus on the figures, but I know a lot of the people collect the GI Joe. Now we're saying accessories as in the guns and stuff. But I'm talking about the separate toys. The USS Flag, obviously, has been one of the huge toys. It's a big, is it like a naval station or is it more of an airport?
Okay,
so to speak?
But that's once they went to the small line of GI Joes.
That's true. That's the difference right there. Okay, that's right, because the figures would fit inside.
Yeah, definitely have a friend who could come on and segue right into that.
We would do that at some point. That'd be a good idea. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you stick mostly to that. Pretty much exclusively to the 12-inch, the older figures.
Yeah. But we, my brother and I, were also interested. If I find anything at the right price, we have networks of friends that if I see the small GI Joes and they're the right price, I'll pick them up, and eventually I'll bundle them and either trade them to a friend or move them to them. So it's fun.
Well, it's been great talking to you. When I heard that you collected GI Joes, I said, man, I got to get this guy on for July. It's just perfect lineup for 4th of July, and man, it's been great having you on, hearing your story, seeing so many rare GI Joes, and man, I'm going to have to have you back on again sometime.
All right, Jack.
All right, it's great seeing you again.
All right, take
Thank
care.
you. And we'll see you all next month again on Toy Talk.
This is the rugged G.I. Joe Adventure Team. Today's mission, rescue stolen idol. Your own G.I. Joe will need the Adventure Team helicopter. Joe gets it together and takes off. There it is, but it's guarded by a giant cobra. Can Joe get the idol? You find out. Search for the stolen idol, a G.I. Joe adventure. G.I. Joe sold separately.